Darcy Byrne. I'm the Mayor of the Inner West. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. I understand that we have an apology this evening from Councillor Raciti.
Also from Councillor Hesse.
And also from Councillor Hesse. Will someone move that they be accepted?
I move that one.
Moved by Councillor Macri, seconded by Councillor Passis. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I'll provide a notice of webcasting of the proceedings tonight. There's a camera which broadcasts the proceedings of our council meetings live onto YouTube and records them there for posterity. And we inform you of that at the beginning of council meetings so that you're aware of the legal implications of any public comments that you might make. Disclosures of interest. Councillors, are there any disclosures of interest tonight? No disclosures? Excellent. Could I ask everyone to please stand for a moment of quiet contemplation? Thank you. Please be seated. Next item on the agenda, item 6, confirmation of minutes of the meeting of the 30th of April. Are there any clarifications or corrections to those minutes, councillors? If not, will someone move their adoption? Moved by Councillor Stamler, seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Item 7, public forum. We'll now begin hearing from the registered speakers that we have for items to be considered tonight. Before we do so, I'll just outline for you the code of meeting practice as it relates to speakers in the public forum. Each citizen who attends the meeting and is registered to speak is entitled to 3 minutes. We're not in the practice of extending that time, and the reason is that if you're the last person to leave here tonight, you wish that everybody else had stuck to time. What buzzer are we using tonight?
It's a more subtle, high-pitched buzzer than last week.
To provide some context for members of the gallery, we used to have quite a nice twinkling bell that reminded you when you were up to 2.5 minutes in your speech, which was replaced at the last meeting by quite a blunt instrument. Can I hear the one that we've got now? Okay. There'll be something that sounds after 2.5 minutes to let you know that you have 30 seconds to go, and then there'll be something else. Does it sound similar? There'll be another sound that sounds very similar, but a bit longer, perhaps more painful. After 3 minutes, and I'll then ask you to conclude your remarks and to sit down. We have registered speakers for 4 items tonight. Item 3, Elliot Park and Balmain Cove-Companion Animal Access Review. Item 6, Notice of Motion Measles. Item 7, Notice of Motion Declaration of Climate Emergency. And item 11, Newstart Raise the Rate campaign. So I'll begin with item 3. The first registered speaker is Ron Glue of Rozelle. Mr. Glue, do you want to come forward? You don't look like Ron Glue. Are you Mr. Maher? Yes. Come forward.
I understand that there are in excess of 4,500 dogs registered in Rozelle and Balmain alone. To understand the issue of dogs off-leash, I will briefly outline the benefits of dog ownership, both physical and social. The physical benefits include increased cardiovascular health, increased physical activity, and dogs are great motivators and personal trainers, never wanting to miss a training session, no matter the weather. The social benefits include those who have dogs and other pets, including children or adolescents, have been shown to have higher self-esteem. Dog owners report less depression. Dogs are also great caregivers. Dogs enhance the social connectiveness and are great conversation starters. In other words, they build communities. There are some 700 plus apartments in Balmain Shores and Balmain Cove, and we go into our apartments each day and close our doors. We don't have back fences where we can chat with our neighbours. Those of us with dogs do this in off-leash areas. My local parks, namely Bridgewater, Balmain Cove and Elliot, are mine and my fellow residents' backyards, so to speak. On arriving at one of these parks, Dion, my cavoodle, takes off to play with other dogs in his own environment, whilst I interact with other owners and discuss various topics from community happenings, sport, social media, and yes, even the weather. After 15 to 20 minutes, most disperse as they head off to work. We say goodbye until we meet again, normally in the same place within 24 hours. At other times, whilst walking my dog, I often meet fellow dog owners and again stop to chat and interact. In this way, I have met hundreds of my local neighbours. The trend for allowing dogs off leash is growing, as only last month the City of Sydney, via a public notice in the Inner West Courier, advertised a proposal in response to community request to establish an area of Harold Park at Forest Lodge for off-leash parks. The area from the Iron Cove Bridge to Balmain High, which includes Bridgewater Park, Balmain Cove and Elliot Park, is a perfect place for dogs off-leash.
If you could conclude your remarks.
Thank you. I would like to thank Council for their community involvement with residents, which now spans 12 months. Now is the time to make Balmain Cove and Elliot Park dogs off-leash, as 77% of submissions received supported being permanent. On behalf of all of those who use this area for off-leash walking, I would ask that a decision be made here tonight to allow it permanently.
Thank you, sir. Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Now, can I ask everyone who was able to hear the two warning bells to raise their hands? Okay. None of the councillors, but everyone at the back of the room. Let's see how we go. We'll come back to Mr. Glue when he arrives. Mr. Maher, if you could... Oh, he's here. Come on up, Ron.
Sorry about the tardiness. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors. My name's Ron Glue. I'm have been the Community Association Chairman for Balmain Cove and Balmain Shores in sequence over the last 20 years. The area has expanded even further. Last time I spoke to you, we had about 1,200 apartments. We now have the Elliot Street apartment complex online. We're approaching 2,000. Each of those apartments are animal friendly, dogs and cats and birds and whatever. But what I am here to do is to commend the officers for their recommendations. It has been a good community process. Those in the immediate vicinity have addressed and put in their feelings on it. We have about not quite three-quarters, well, we have more than three-quarters of the community agreeing to it, but not quite 4/5. We have a situation where, and I can speak from experience, over the last 20 years, Elliot Park and the front section of Balmain Cove has been an off-leash area, irrespective. We do have a great community in that area, a very caring community, and everyone knows that Balmain and Rozelle are so dog-friendly, and there's so many animals there. With the amount of apartments that we do have in the immediate area, about 25–30% of those apartments have an animal, and those dogs really make up the character of the area. They are very, very community focused. Everyone watches everyone and make sure that they look after the environment. We pick up after the school children. We pick up after the not so complying dog owners. There are a few, but we've managed to either convince them not to attend or to at least pick up. And our ladies, particularly of an afternoon, are walking around. Any dog owner that does the wrong thing, they're chased and given a bag to pick up. So Simply and flatly, all we're doing is we've had this situation occurring for over, near enough to 20 years. I won't say over, but near enough to 20 years. It just reinforces what has happened. And I commend the decision to council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glue. Next item for which we have registered speakers is item 6, notice of motion on measles. And the first registered speaker is Carolyn O'Loughlin.
Good evening. I'd like to oppose the motion for its attack on free speech. They describe ill-informed or dangerous. I do have. They go very quiet, yet we know what happens. I know what happens, and other people know what happens. Due to this, the public is denied information needed to assess the benefit versus risk of all vaccines. That's what it basically comes to, benefit versus risk. And people of goodwill can have different opinions on this, and they shouldn't be censored over them. The influence of the big pharmaceutical companies, and they are in league with government to a great degree, appears to have an all-encompassing effect. They appear to have the media to do their bidding all the time. You don't hear the opposite side. In the USA, there appears to be more transparency. Indeed, some outbreaks of measles have been traced back to vaccinated individuals. The MMR vaccine is not that reliable, hence they have this rather inflated number to have herd immunity. It's because the effect wears off over time. And it's also complicated. There's wild measles going around, and then there's the measles in the vaccine going around. So there's all sorts of strange interactions going on. In 2009, there were documents, a group obtained documents under the Freedom of Information Act. And it shows that MMR2, the second one, was licensed on the basis of inadequate testing. Only 834 children were involved in the test, of whom 332 were given the new vaccine. The control group was given another vaccine rather than a true placebo like saline. Quite a lot of the children who had the MR2 vaccine had respiratory and gastrointestinal illness afterwards. It was in the vicinity of about 40%. Most serious of all, the children were only followed up for 42 days post-vaccination. Now, 42 days, surely it should be longer for a normal drug. The MR2 vaccine insert, and the vaccine insert shows that, it's pretty good, but at one point it states this: MMR2 has not been evaluated for carcinogenic or mutagenic potential or potential to infer fertility. So that's a direct quote from that. No one knows the long-term effects of vaccines. Since there has been increased vaccination, there's been a marked rise in chronic conditions like allergies and asthma. In fact, the Australian authorities are investigating the DPT vaccine in connection with this.
If you could conclude your remarks, please, Madam. Your time.
Just that I think that, I'm opposed to that motion because of its attack on free speech and its general prejudice against free speech and its use of censorship. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, raise your hand if you could hear the bell that time.
I heard it.
Well, we did have a functioning bell system previously that worked pretty well for the last year and a half. I couldn't hear it then, sorry. Is there something we can do to adjust it so it can be heard? Okay. Next item, item 7, notice of motion declaration of climate emergency. First speaker, Reid Pearce of Enmore.
My name is Reid Pearce, and I'm in support of declaring a climate emergency tonight. I'm with the local branch of the environmental group Extinction Rebellion, and I just first of all want to thank you for your time tonight. So 5 years ago, I immigrated to Australia in search of a better life and specifically chose to live in the Inner West because of its openness, inclusivity, and progressiveness. However, on the matter of climate change, the Inner West Council is lagging. Actually, climate change is no longer the term we should be using. It may have been a suitable term 40 years ago when scientists, governments, and corporations first determined that an increase in carbon emissions would lead to a hotter planet. The more appropriate term is climate emergency because that is indeed what it is. Just in the last couple of months in Australia, we've had 1 million cows die in floods. Millions of fish died due to water shortage in the Murray-Darling River system. And 3.5% of Tasmania's land area burned down in fires, while all of New South Wales is in drought. As effects like these rise exponentially, our society will reach a breaking point. As a parent, I see the fear on my children's faces when they hear they may not have a hospitable planet to live on. How can we continue to let our children down like this? For them and their futures, I joined the group Extinction Rebellion as I was inspired by their last-ditch effort to save the planet. This nonviolent activist group inspired me in their clear and non-political demands, which are: number one, insist governments tell the truth about the climate catastrophe; number two, rapidly decarbonize the economy; and number three, democratize the transition to a carbon-free future by having a citizens' assembly oversee the process. The first demand is why I'm here today. We've been misled by the federal and state governments that climate catastrophe is somehow avoidable as long as we make minor changes down the road. No serious proposals have been made, and meanwhile more coal is being dug up whilst the Great Barrier Reef is dying. Our council is complicit in this ecocide. Now is the time to stand and declare a climate emergency. By declaring a climate emergency, we join councils around the world and 17 other councils around Australia, including local ones like Randwick and the Blue Mountains. We will also be following in the steps of the UK and Irish parliaments, which recently declared climate emergencies. More than 400 councils across Australia, Canada, US, the UK, and Switzerland have all declared climate emergencies, with more every day. Will Interwest join this group of global leaders or not? The ultimate aim is a national declaration of a climate emergency with its ability to unlock all the required policy changes and funds for a rapid climate emergency response. But local councils like Interwest can start the ball rolling by demonstrating successful climate emergency initiatives at the local level. The question you have to ask yourself,
Time has expired, sir. If you could
okay,
conclude
if
your
not
remarks.
now, when? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dominic Case of Balmain East.
Thank you, Mayor. My name's Dominic Case. I'm with the local group Climate Change Balmain Roselle. Well, the previous speakers made the situation for this motion very clear indeed. Anything less than dramatic and urgent action on the climate will lead to disastrous consequences. When this council was elected a couple of years ago, many of the councillors presented strong positions on climate change, and council moved quickly to adopt many of those policy positions and has signed up to the city's power partnership agreement. But for many people, the language has already changed, at least from climate change to climate crisis. The gap between the most we can practically achieve in the time left to mitigate change and the least we need to do to avoid disaster is narrowing dramatically. And what we're actually doing falls far short of both of those trajectories. Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish schoolgirl, told world leaders at the Davos Economic Summit, "I want you to panic." In Poland, at the Climate Summit, 93-year-old Sir David Attenborough said, "The world's people want you, the decision makers, to act now. Leaders of the world, you must lead." Somehow, combining those elements of panic and leadership, we must find the right formula, but it must include a recognition at every level of leadership that we no longer have any time to lose. So maybe even the word crisis isn't enough. Without panicking, but a clear understanding that more than ever we need leaders to unite us in making the necessary changes to our ways of doing things and taking care of anyone who is affected by those changes. Sounds pretty much like a classic emergency to me. As we've heard, 17 councils in Australia have already declared that we face a climate emergency. I think it's over 500 councils around the world, and of course we've heard that the government in Westminster has voted to declare a climate emergency. I see that as quite an achievement. Westminster hasn't really agreed on anything much recently, so that's surely a powerful step forward. But what is achieved by declaring a climate emergency at council level? This motion isn't hopefully yet, about a World War II scenario of requisitioning factories and issuing ration books. It is about, at the very least, coordinated action at every level of government if we are to succeed. It's about showing leadership. It's about holding council to a number of key performance indicators, and it's about, and I quote our Mayor, Councillor Byrne, in 2017, it's about our newly elected council punching above its weight in the national environmental debate. So I urge councillors not only to support this motion, but also to continually seek ways in which council can put these words into action, and to prioritise climate and emissions outcomes in consideration of every single action that council takes. Every single action. Anything less is a missed opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Gillian Raffel.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of several local Stop Adani groups. My name is Gillian Raffel, and I've raised my family in Summerhill for the last 22 years. For the last 6 years, I've been active in grassroots groups seeking to take action to tackle the climate crisis that we're in. Since it was approved in 2014, I have been most concerned with stopping the Adani mine. Along with others in the Stop Adani movement, we've worked to stop the money flowing to the mine, to build a movement of people willing to take action, and to change the politics around climate change. I think we've made significant headway in this endeavour, and I think we're seeing that right now in relation to this federal election campaign. Tonight, as I said, I'm speaking on behalf of several Stop Adani groups, and they include Sydney, Marrickville, Lewisham, Redfern and Glebe. We in the Stop Adani groups know that people in the inner west are concerned about climate change and the signs of impending ecological breakdown. For many months now, we have had hundreds of conversations with people throughout the inner west in door knocks, market stalls, rallies, movie nights, and lots of other things. People have clearly expressed to us their worry and outrage at the political inaction on this issue. Both at the federal and state levels, it's miles too difficult to engage politicians in dialogue about taking meaningful action on climate change and the impending ecological breakdown. Both the major parties currently, for example, support the Adani mine, even though well over 70% of Australians do not. Councils are the closest level of government to the people. Councils making statements about values of their community is important and influential. I have been proud of this council's moves in terms of its divestment motions, in joining the Cities Power Partnership, and just last year resolving to support the Stop Adani campaign. Other progressive New South Wales councils have declared a climate emergency. It's now time that Inner West, that is a well-known progressive council, joined them. A simple, powerful council statement of concern and a resolution to act accordingly is a very significant communication device in pressing for rapid and dramatic action by other levels of government. I think all of us here tonight will agree to stand up and acknowledge hope you agree to stand up and acknowledge the climate emergency that we're in and join other progressive councils in seeking to press for action, urgent action. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item for which we have registered speakers is item 11, and the first speaker is Thomas Studans of Carlton in New South Wales.
Good evening, Council, and to all present. My name is Tom Studans. I am New South Wales Coordinator of the Australian Unemployed Workers Union, who've been campaigning for a raise to Newstart for many years. I've been a resident of and a Newstart recipient in the Inner West Council area from 2013 to 18, and I continue to work with our members, our Inner West branch, and other Centrelink recipients in the area. Newstart was last raised in real terms when I was 3 years old. I'm 28 now. I'm reliably informed that it wasn't much money then either. Since that time, there's been consensus in federal parliament that not only should the benefit not be raised, but it shouldn't even keep pace with the growth condition of capitalism. It's an increasingly extreme view and doesn't reflect wider community sentiment. As a nation, at every level of public life, we must make clear that this orthodoxy doesn't serve anybody outside the federal party rooms, and we'll tolerate it no longer. Like a staggering 1 in 4 Newstart recipients, I have significant medical barriers to work. It's commonly known as a disability. However, 73% of disability pension claims are rejected, so is mine. As anyone in my situation will tell you, it's a living hell, a horror difficult to conceive of in a wealthy city like Sydney. I've been forced to skip meals and my psychiatric medication more times than I can count. It's hard to access treatment consistently on a low income. My mental illness has deteriorated and been made more complex by a combination of extreme poverty and a punitive privatised employment services environment. I'm lucky enough to have survived, many of us do not. Currently, the AUWU is one of the only organisations in a position to keep track of the human cost of social security policy in Australia, and we hear of suicides on a weekly basis. During my time in the Inner West, I spent around 70 to 80% of my Newstart on rent. What this meant for me was isolation, hunger, and fear, and also that I don't live here anymore because I can't afford it. The cost of living in Sydney is prohibitive to the ability of those on Newstart to have lasting human connections. It's soul-destroying to experience and a barrier to council efforts to build inclusive communities. But if left unchecked, it poses a serious risk to society. The combination of intense vulnerability and isolation, when mainstream politics has invalidated you for so long and you see no way out, you're left with a hostility and nowhere to challenge it. We know that 20% of One Nation voters support a raise to Newstart, and I've personally witnessed politicians manipulate this discussion within the LGA to promote white supremacist talking points. At a time when public faith in politics is so low, I urge the council, show us that you've got our backs and you will take up this fight with us. We're looking to you for leadership where others continue to fail time and again. Support the motion, raise the rate.
Our last registered speaker is Rosanna Barbaro of Newtown.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to address this forum tonight. My name is Rosanna and I live and work in the Inner West. I'm the CEO of the Addison Road Community Centre organisation, and we see an integral link to economic injustice, the climate crisis and social inequality. And so I'm here to talk about what we see on a weekly basis, which now we've reached 1,250 families that line up to get food support from our food pantry. I know that a couple of council meetings ago you had Dulce, one of our staff here, talking about Mama Penny. We've increased our outreach program because the demand is exceeding what we're able to provide to our community. And what we hear on a daily basis, and I said today to the lineup, I said, I'm going to address the council today. What would you like me to say? And they said, tell them that we are human beings and that we are suffering and we cannot live on the Newstart rate. Something has to be done because this situation is punishing the poor and we haven't done anything. I'm not here to tell my esteemed councillors and the leaders of our community about the statistics that prove the growing inequality in Australia. I'm not here to tell you where the wealth is because we know where the wealth is, and I'm not here to tell you the percentage of people that are on Newstart and are doing it tough, and I'm not here to tell you that the middle class is also suffering. I'm here to tell you that on a daily basis we see and hear people's humiliation and difficulty in paying the rent, making choices about what food items they should buy, making choices about the lights on, about where they can live, where they can't live, where they can travel to, what they should do, how can they access dental, whether they go to job providers, how stressed stressful and anxious that experience can be because they're treated really badly. I'm here to say that it's time that we, along with council and other citizens, are reminded that 70% of Australians support the Raise the Rate campaign. There is nobody that can say that they can live on $40 a day. Absolutely nobody can, and that's also proven. So I'd just like to use my 4 minutes to remind everybody it's time.
Is that going to be a recording of Little Paddy?
I wanted to sing.
Okay. Maybe we can do some interpretive dance later on. Okay. Thank you very much all for your contributions. We'll now move on with the rest of the business on the agenda. There's not a lot on the agenda tonight, so if you'd like to stick around, it won't be too long until we get to your item. If you need to go, you are able to watch the proceedings at home on YouTube, as I mentioned previously. Got one condolence motion and one mayoral minute tonight as the next items on the agenda. The condolence motion is in honour of Father John Pearce, formerly the priest at St Bridget's Church in Marrickville, who passed away the weekend before last. Father Pearce was a very well-loved and respected figure in the Marrickville community, played a great role in...
But the most important thing, he was a humble person. He talked to everyone, and he paid respect to everyone, especially from disadvantaged background. So I share with you, and I congratulate you for such very important mayoral minute. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Father John will be remembered for many things in the community. He was always... and he did listen, but he wasn't afraid to tell you what he thought either. So, and that was the thing I liked about him. He wasn't afraid of making difficult decisions as far as the church was concerned regarding the actual continuation of the church, the masses, the order of the masses, and it disenfranchised some people that were used to their traditional ways, but he was progressive in that way, and he was looking after the greater community. So,
Touch Day for Pacific students with local primary schools, and the screening of short films and documentaries, including Power Mary, the film that I referenced in regards to the Papua New Guinean Women's Rugby League team. The NRL has requested Council's assistance in whatever way we can in carrying out the delivery of this program and trying to make it a series of community events that the inner west community can get engaged in rather than just a sporting event. One of the best ways that Council can do this is through our communications channels, including social media, our advertisements in the local paper and our community newsletter. So I'm going to recommend that Council endorse and welcome the 6th Pacific Test Invitational at Leichhardt Oval on the 22nd of June, and that we work with the NRL and West Tigers to promote the games and associated events. We make use of one of Council's access days at the Actors Centre, the Italian Forum, in Leichhardt, to allow the NRL to host the Pacific Youth Summit there, if that's achievable. That we promote the invitational and associated events through Council's communication channels, and that we approach Palace Cinemas to request, on Norton Street, to request assistance in screening of a midweek screening of the film, the aforementioned film. So I'll move that way. Councillor Passis.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with this. How did this come about?
Do you want me to answer that as a question to me now, or would you prefer that I answer it in my right of reply?
Yeah, well, okay then. It's just that, do we make this for somebody else if they wanted it? Is it something we're going to start, or is it a one-off, or...?
We were approached by the NRL because they were looking for a venue to hold this event, which had already been planned, and as with a lot of other sporting events of late, because of the rebuild of the stadiums, Most codes are looking for alternative venues to host events such as this.
So will this be ongoing?
I think it's unlikely that we'll get the Pacific Invitational every year.
Or from somewhere else, maybe?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
Further discussion, councillors? There being no further discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next item is the budget. Councillors, I'll move adoption of the officer's recommendation, which is simply to put the budget out on public exhibition. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Macri. I'll withhold my right to speak to that. I'll open the floor to discussion. Councillor Passos.
Well, I'm not happy with what's proposed, not at all. And I am also very unhappy that we did not get together and sit down and really go through this with a fine-tooth comb. I have a lot of questions I needed to ask, and I really would like to ask it of the officers, and I'd also like to know the reasoning of some of these fees and charges. I would like some explanation. And we have not received that. But I will go along and vote for it to go out on exhibition, but there are a lot of questions that need answering when this comes back to council to adopt this budget.
Thank you for that, Councillor Passos. Further discussion, councillors? There being, Councillor Porteous. Yep.
Yes, look, I'm actually pretty horrified with this budget. I mean, it's extremely disappointing to see that we have a budget which is projecting a significant operating deficit, which gets worse every year. And for us to be putting out an exhibition, a budget of that nature with this very significant deficit, and really no proper plans to address this budget deficit, apart from those that are indicated in the recommendations, which are basically to ask the staff to once again try and find savings, which tended to be last year basically not employing staff when they should have been employing staff and reducing services which can't be reduced. But the other areas which are proposed to address are to look at the issue of consolidation of our properties and the possibility of selling off this town hall here and the Petersham Marrickville Town Hall in order to pay for a new town hall to be built in Leichhardt. And I think the fact that we're even considering this as a way to save money is really quite shocking, and also a terrible indication about where this council is going. And I certainly won't be supporting that this evening. I'm also extremely concerned about the fees and charges that are being proposed in this, and that we only received that information last night. And some of those fees and charges, we're looking at increases in some cases of 100%, 200%. One actually had 1,000% increase. And this is all under the, largely under the lovely terminology of harmonisation, because we're now a forcibly amalgamated council. Not acceptable, I'm sorry. And have we been consulted on this? No, we haven't. Did we agree that we wanted to have cost recovery? No, we didn't. Did we agree that we wanted to harmonise all our fees and charges? No, we didn't. So I'm again horrified that this is what we're seeing in this budget. The process has been also outlined by Councillor Passos. Terrible. I'm sorry, we've had almost no consultation as councillors. We've been kept largely in the dark as in what's actually in this budget. And again, entirely unacceptable. So I'm going to move to amendments. I'd like those amendments to be dealt with separately. I have sent those to the minute taker, if you could possibly bring those up. The first one is that we remove 3C. 3C reads, continue analysis of the feasibility of greatly enhanced access for community to council services through the consolidation of its administration buildings and depot, i.e. read selling off our publicly owned council properties. So I've moved that we remove that. And the other amendment that I have is that we put on public exhibition a draft fee and charges for 2019-20, which has proposed increases which are capped at CPI. So we don't put on exhibition what has been proposed by the staff, except for any new proposed increases greater than CPI that have been previously approved through the council processes.
Thank you for that.
And that councillors to receive a briefing on staff proposals to increase fees beyond CPI or to introduce new fees. So they're the two amendments I'd like them to be voted on separately. Thank you.
For that. Councillor Kiat?
Thank you, Chair. Look, I share some of the concerns expressed by Councillor Passos and Councillor Porteous in relation to, well, obviously, Council's fiscal direction and also the process by which we've been informed about this budget. I think that it was unfortunate that we had planned a day on which we would be briefed on the budget on a weekend when we were all available, and that never eventuated. That was really unfortunate, and I think that's left us, a little bit less informed than we would like to be on some of the solutions to turn around the deficit that we're running at the moment. Obviously, it's totally unsustainable, and something needs to be done. But as Councillor Porteous has alluded to, one of the solutions that we're looking at involves selling off vital community assets, which really is just kicking the can down the road, and also doesn't really have the kind of feasibility around it. You know, the kind of operational expenses and disruption that would cause would be serious, and I would hope that we could come up with better solutions that don't involve sell-offs. I think the easiest way to explain the reason for Council's fiscal position is around the amalgamations and the way that's been done. It hasn't driven efficiencies, and in fact, it's led to the position we're in now, where we can't increase rates, we can't change the way the rates are raised, and we also, which I think it's a good thing that we have guarantees for our staff. But that means that because there hasn't been any efficiencies through the amalgamation, this is where we are. I have some amendments that I've sent through to the minute taker. I think that, similar to Councillor Porteous, I think they should be dealt with separately. I've tried to put them all together so that they can just be considered together, but they relate to very different issues. And I'm happy to explain them quickly. So, in relation to efficiency measures, again, we've put $5 million in efficiency measures to be achieved that I don't think has been achieved in this year. I think that it's important that when we're looking at these efficiency measures, the first port of call is consultants and contractors. I think we want to continue to increase the capacity of our own staff, and so I don't want to see us not filling new positions or keeping staff in a talent pool when we can actually build our organizational capacity. So I'd rather see us look at the use of consultants and contractors first. The second issue relates to our rating structure. I think it's really important as we move towards reforming our rating structure that we look at making it progressive. I've spoken about this a few times. The third point, Chair, can I continue to just explain the amendments quickly?
Could we bring them up as well?
Oh. Okay.
I'll tell you what, how about you provide them to the minute taker and then I'll come back to you to allow you to outline them.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Drury.
Thank you, Mayor. I rise to support the motion unamended. I'd like to thank the staff for all the work that's gone in this so far, particularly Michael Simoulos and the Deputy General Managers. I think the truth is that we struggle to find the money to properly look after the over 1,700 million in assets that we have, to pay the over 1,500 staff that we have, and provide all the community services that our community needs and expects. Every year, every council experiences the same problem. We are not alone in this challenge. There is no simple solution to the entrenched local government budget problems. Anyone who tells you there's a simple solution is a fool or a snake oil salesperson. We know residents rely on council for a number of essential local services, as well as wanting us to improve their communities. We know that every time we ask the community, that's what they tell us. Suite of budget documents put out on exhibition tonight seeks to provide for our community in the most fiscally responsible way we can, given the constraints that are placed on us predominantly by the New South Wales Government. The budget maintains existing service provisions, provides for us looking after our assets and continues our existing programs. And it does this with an operating deficit. An operating deficit of $18 million. We've got the capacity to cover that through grants and reserves, but we know we can't do that indefinitely. We know we need a different solution to this. And this is why we want our new General Manager to continue to find ways to address this, and this motion outlines 4 of those ways that we want the General Manager to go out and look for some possible solutions to this, and he may come up with some others as well. I don't think that we should be ruling out any reasonable efforts to address these issues. Lest we seek into doom and gloom, I'd like to draw people's attention to page 16, which goes to the 4-year delivery program highlights, which talks about delivering the Ashfield Aquatic Centre, delivering improvements to Dawn Fraser bars, synthetics turf playing fields, a lot more money, 17% increase on expenditure on roads,
Councillor, your time
$10 million to renew footpaths, etc., etc. I'd urge people not to
Councillor, your time has expired.
go to gloom, but also to look at what we can provide for our community.
Thank you. Councillor Stamos.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Fellow councillors, you know that over the last 18 months I've been the single councillor here who has asked over and over again for briefings on the merger. I've been unsuccessful in my attempts at achieving those briefings. This is the major transformational change of the Inner West, and we've failed as councillors to have ongoing briefings. We'll have a guess where it comes out. It comes out in the wash in your documents in front of you here, and our public are having to wear it. I don't agree with Councillor Drury. I don't think our public have confidence in where we're going here. There are major increases in charges and costs on our community. We have concerns about budget deficits that we probably wouldn't have had we've got an efficient merger rather than the political merger that we have in front of us today. We have a political merger. We don't have an efficient merger of our council, and that will be worn in the costs on our community over the decades ahead. So I don't share that confidence. I would rather the documents go out on exhibition, but they cannot go out on exhibition without information sessions to our public, and also to have detailed briefings for our councillors over the coming weeks before it comes back to council again. I want to thrash through some of these issues. Service deliveries has changed, and it is not up to it is now moving towards the lowest common denominator rather than to the highest levels that we were hoping that we could promise our community. That is not occurring now. In fact, we're not even having a discussion about harmonisation of many of our policies across council. We need to do that as councillors, and we need to do that with our executive team. So I think here, I have concerns. I want some information going out to our public. So that is the first amendment that I'm going to make, is that council establish budget briefings for our residents, at least 3 briefings for our residents over the coming weeks, and also at least 3 briefings on the budget for our councillors. So that's the amendment that I'll be making tonight. We need to be across this material. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Further discussion, councillors? Councillor Lockie?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just wanted to say I do share a lot of the concerns that people have raised with feeling like more detailed information about this is required before it comes back to council again. I'm willing to support the motion to go for this to go out to public exhibition without the additional amendments proposed by Councillors Kiat and Porteous, and that's not because I don't think those issues are worth considering. I absolutely do. But I would like to receive some more information about those as part of the briefing processes that we'll be going through over the coming weeks. And that's all I had to say.
Passos has asked me to remind councillors it has been noticeable that it hasn't been occurring so far tonight that under the Code of Meeting Practice, councillors are required to address the chair when speaking in debate. So I'll ask you to be mindful of that, please. So we've heard from councillors Passos, Porteous, Kiat, Drury, Lockie and Stamoulis. Further discussion, councillors? Well, your time's expired. Your amendments have been placed on the screen so councillors are all able to see them. So you're not able to speak to them again. But I think everyone's...
Point of order, you actually did say to Councillor Kiat that he would be able to speak to them. So I would have moved an extension of time.
Well, please do. You're still able to now.
On Councillor Kiat's speech?
Yep.
Okay, so I'd like to move an extension of time to allow Councillor Kiat to explain the amendments that he's proposing to the council.
What period of time?
For 1 minute? Yeah.
That sounds good.
Councillor Porteous is moving the extension of time of 1 minute for Councillor Kiat. Is there a seconder for that? Yep. Seconded by Councillor Steer. Sorry about that, Councillor Steer. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Please proceed.
I'm against. Put that down.
Okay.
They wouldn't give me an extra minute.
The third point was in relation to investigations in relation to selling and consolidating council assets. I think that the recommendation as printed says continue analysis of the feasibility of greatly enhanced access for the community to council services through consolidation of its administration buildings and depots. I think this is not inconsistent with that. What I'm saying is when we're looking into ways that we can increase community access, it needs to focus on buildings that are not essential community infrastructure. So I think we don't want to pretend that that's going to be a successful project. So selling off administration buildings, service centres and town halls, I don't think that we should prioritise those investigations when we're looking at the deficit. The fourth point is about establishing an affordable housing fund. It's something that we've already asked for advice on. I just want to receive advice on that before we finalise the budget. And the fifth is for the inclusion, for advice on inclusion of additional amendments on KPIs and key actions in the operational plan.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, councillors. Councillor Macri.
Thanks, Chair. I think a few assumptions have been made here. I think the budget needs to go out in its form that's been prepared. The reason why councillors didn't want to turn up on the briefing, well, I was prepared to turn up. Other people had different issues. I'm not going to cover for them, so they should stand up and say why the briefings didn't go ahead. So don't blame it on the staff or blame it on anyone else. It's because councillors withdrew from that day. Now, all councils said they were fit for the future, and that's not right.
Please proceed.
All councils said they were fit for the future, and we've just seen the councils that didn't amalgamate going for large rate rises. These councils that we amalgamated were probably not fit for the future either, and we just look at the works that need to be done in the Leichhardt Council, with the works on the Leichhardt Town Hall, Leichhardt Pool coming out 15 million, Ashfield Pool, another 40 million, Dawn Fraser Pool also needs more money. And to say that we shouldn't be looking at rationalising our administration buildings, we still want our people to work in 3 different buildings, none of them which meets the needs. We're going to come up to the verge now where we're going to spend $4 million on a building at Petersham that doesn't meet our needs. If that's not the biggest waste of money, and people come here talk about the climate change emergency, there's an emergency here in this chamber. The way councillors are treating the environment and the resources of this council. That's a serious issue. You cannot say you're addressing climate change when you expect staff to drive around the streets, going from building to building, spending 2 hours of their day burning up, causing CO2 emissions, when you don't want to consolidate into one building. I find that absurd. It should have been done on the first job that council looked at. And as far as wages and employing more people and getting rid of contractors, council collects $120 million in rates. Look at the budget papers. We are paying $125 million in wages. Where do you think you're going to grow and employ more people? That's absurd. And you want to say that blame it on the state government. It's the state government's fault because they won't let us charge whatever we want. Well, I'll tell you what, the gallery would be full of people if we could charge whatever we wanted because people wouldn't wear that. I don't blame the state government because I've seen the way money is thrown around in this chamber and I don't support it. And I think it's important that we look at this budget and find the ways to peel back this $24 million emergency budget. Thank you.
Okay, there being no further discussion, I will very briefly go for one question from myself to the Chief Financial Officer. Then I will go to the minute takers and the administration officers just to briefly outline the series of amendments that we will be voting on. There was an assertion made that no savings had been made in the previous 12 months. Now, I know we adopted a savings efficiency target of $5 million.
Just to clarify, who do you believe made that assertion?
Councillor Kiat stated it in his speech.
No, sir, I don't think the 5 million.
Well, okay. Thank you for your interjection. I'll just ask a simple question. I haven't spoken to the matter. You tell me when you've concluded. It's like we're in high school. You tell me when you've concluded, and then I'll get on with my one question to the officers. Okay. Could you please outline for us the savings that have been made during the course of the current financial year?
Through the chair, I circulated to councillors yesterday a memo with a number of savings against the budget, and I use the word savings loosely. These are either revenue increases in the revenue that we've obtained over the period of time, or savings that we've had against the budget. They totaled about $5.9 million overall. So we've achieved the 5.5 million target that we spoke about. And they include things like review of our lease revenues against budget, operating efficiencies in costs in footpaths, roads, trees, parks and streetscapes.
Thank you for that. I'll speak very briefly. Well, no, I'll go to the motions first, to the amendments first, so everyone's clear on what we're voting on. So if we can do them in order in which they were received. We've got 2 amendments from Councillor Porteous. I presume there's a seconder for those. Seconded by Councillor Kiat. We'll vote on both of those separately as per Councillor Porteous's intention. Then we've got 5 amendments from Councillor Kiat, which he also wants to move separately. Is there a seconder for all of those collectively? Seconded by Councillor Porteous. Then we've got an amendment from Councillor Stamoulis. Is there a seconder for that? There's no seconder for that. Yep, seconded by Councillor Steer. And that will be voted on separately as well.
Can I just have some clarification on
yes.
Councillor Stamoulis' amendment? Is that pre-budget briefings for residents? So community advice, one briefings.
Separate to councillor briefings. Okay, so we'll go and vote on all of those separately. I'll just make a very brief right of reply, which is simply to note that 10 of the 15 councillors did vote for an efficiency target when we adopted the last budget. 4 of the 5 who didn't are in attendance tonight. I think it's a bit rich to take criticisms from people who opposed the efficiency target and would have driven the budget further into deficit about how to manage the budget, and I'll leave it at that. So we'll now go to the first amendment from Councillor Porteous for the deletion of 3C. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That has been defeated. Next amendment. Moved by Councillor Porteous, seconded by Councillor Kiat. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? 9 against. That has been defeated. Next amendment from Councillor Kiat, seconded by Councillor Porteous. All those in favour? 4 in favour. All those against? 9 against. That has been defeated. Second amendment from Councillor Kiat. All those in favour? All those against? I'll just recommit that because there were 2 hands that weren't seen. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That has been defeated. Amendment 3 from Councillor Kiat. All those in favour, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? That's 8 against. That has been defeated. Was that Amendment 4 or Amendment 3? 3. I'm losing track. Amendment 4 from Councillor Kiat in relation to affordable housing. All those in favour, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That has been defeated. Amendment 5 from Councillor Kiat. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? That's 8 against. That has been defeated. Next amendment from Councillor Stamoulis for briefing sessions. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? That's 9 against. That has been defeated. That deals with all of the amendments, all of which were defeated. I'll now put the primary motion for the officer's budget to go out on public exhibition. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? That has been carried unanimously. Next item, Elliot Park and Balmain Cove Companion Animal Access Review. Councillors, will someone move the officer's recommendation? Moved by Councillor Macri, seconded by Councillor Stamoulis. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against it? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour? All those against? That has been carried unanimously. Item 4. Councillor De Cruz is against item 3. So that's... Hold on. Let's go back and recommit it all then. Item 2, outdoor advertising and signage in transport corridors policy. I'll recommit the Elliot Park vote in a moment. Is there a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Macri, seconded by Councillor Drury. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against it?
I had an alternate resolution that I've sent through.
Hold on. Councillor Macri, did you wish to speak to it? Withhold?
Yeah.
Councillor Drury? Councillor Drury, did you wish to speak to it?
This seems like a eminently sensible suggestion to try and attract some more income, and it might be lost on councillors. We actually do need to try and find some more income.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Kiat, do you have a foreshadowed motion? I'll come back to you, Councillor Passos.
Yes. Agreed with Councillor Drury that we do need to, it's sensible to seek cash contributions where possible when we are approving DAs for outdoor advertising and signage and transport corridors. And I'm happy for this to go on public exhibition. I would just like to receive advice from our officers in relation to some of the policy implications of this policy in relation to things like driver safety, public space amenity, impacts on flora and fauna. I know that, for example, electronic billboards can have an impact on, we all know about microbats here if you're a Greenway follower. So things like that, which I wouldn't expect to know anything about. What impact outdoor advertising might have on driver safety, and the extent to which our current policy weights in favour or against public amenity. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking for advice on. I don't think we need to delay putting on an exhibition, but I would like to see, just some advice from our officers on how, where this policy falls in terms of, are we really, really against these kinds of DAs, or are we really letting them in? And that, I think the focus of the report that we received was on how we can obtain the cash contributions, but I'd like to look at those other issues too.
Okay, that seems fairly uncontroversial. It's certainly not a foreshadowed motion. It's an amendment. Councillor Macri, do you have any objection to that? That can be incorporated. Councillor Passos?
I'd go even further and charge all the politicians for their core flutes on every poll. Why don't we charge them $20 each? Mr Albanese will have to sell his house.
Hear, hear.
Now, Councillor just said something he's a little bit concerned about maybe the animals in the area if we've got electronic lights. Well, I move that we put as many as we can in Dulwich Hill. They're having a rat plague. The people can't stand how they're living after the demolition of some properties. They said they've been overrun by rats. Well, I'll tell you what, I would like some electronic signs in my street too, if that's the case. I raised something like this earlier and I didn't receive support for it. I would like us to look at paid advertising on our garbage bins. They're covered in all types of graffiti and different political posters that are half ripped off, look very unsightly, very untidy, taking our staff's time up to remove them. Why don't we put advertising on all our garbage bins, our street bins? That is revenue. And as we know, when you put murals on walls and things like that, they're not graffitied. So maybe we can take this a step further and take that idea on board.
Can I just raise a point of order, Chair? Just around whether the current proposal is to adopt or place on exhibition the policy. I was suggesting that we put on exhibition. The recommendation is that we...
Oh, okay, well that would make it a foreshadowed motion then. And I presume, well, you can't incorporate it because it's a foreshadowed motion. Yeah. I think the movers are seeking to get the information that you're asking for. Are you willing to amend the wording to indicate it would be adopted with a supplementary report to be received on those issues? Yeah. Look at this, compromise and action. That's actually quite a useful suggestion, I think, about the advertising. I'm not sure that was the case. Okay, so there being no further discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next item. So I'll recommit the vote on the Elliot Park and Balmain Cove-Companion Animal Access Review. It's moved by Councillor Macri, the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Stamoulis. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? Councillor De Cruz is against. That has been carried. Item 4, third quarter budget review. Moved by Councillor Drury. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Stamoulis. There's no one speaking against it. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Local Government Remuneration Tribunal determination. Is there a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Porteous, seconded by Councillor De Cruz. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Item 6, notice of motion, measles. Councillor York.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to obviously move the notice of motion that I've submitted on measles. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but I wanted just to make a couple of comments ahead of any debate. I wanted to address a couple of things. Firstly, why have I submitted this now and why is Council taking a role? Obviously, there's been a spike in measles cases in New South Wales, including in and around the inner west. Right now, we're less than halfway through the year and the number of reported cases in New South Wales is at a 5-year high. Every time a case is reported, which is required under the Health Act, parents contact me, motivated by the sheer worry of a near miss. So they see their child was on that bus or their young child was in that shopping centre where a measles case was reported. And I'm particularly alert to this as a parent of a very small infant who is too small to be immunised against measles. Contrary to the very copious advice that I've received on my Facebook page in the last 24 hours on this issue, measles is a highly infectious disease. It can lead to fatal complications, particularly for very small children and people whose immune systems are compromised. In terms of council's role in promoting and protecting the health of the community, I don't pretend that council is the authoritative health advisor in the state. That's why the motion requests that we write to New South Wales Health to ask for best practices in this area. But we run childcare centres that don't allow children to enrol in them unless their vaccinations are up to date. We run playgrounds and play groups and the yellow bus where children and families come together on a regular basis. We provide a free vaccination service. We do have a role in the health and the safety of our community. As a new mum, by far, the number one touch point that I had with any level of government was with our local council. It's one of the motivators for me to get involved in council in the first place. To me, this is a very clear role for us. On the point of freedom of speech, which has been raised with me again several times, this to me is not a freedom of speech issue. It's not even a controversial issue, I don't think. We would not allow people to use our council-owned facilities to spread anti-health messages. We would not allow people to come into our council-owned buildings and say, drinking makes you a better driver, or smoking does not cause cancer. This is the same kind of thing. We should not be allowing these messages to confuse parents, to cause concern in the community, and in fact, to expose our community to harm. Again, I think this is not setting a precedent for valid debate in our community and shutting down valid debate. This is not a matter of opinions. This is a matter of fact versus, I'm not even going to describe it with a word. I realise many people have been upset by this. I have been at the receiving end of some of that upset recently, but I think council needs to take a strong position on that, and if that
Councillor,
upsets
your
some
time has
people, I for
expired.
one am willing to do it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Steer is seconding the motion. Councillor Passes, do you wish to speak to it? Yes, I do. Now I'll go to Councillor Passes.
Thank you. I thank Councillor York for bringing this motion. I think it's very important. My kids were vaccinated 25 years ago or so they could go to council-run childcare, which was extremely successful. If that was the policy 25 years ago, why shouldn't it be the policy now? And I believe it still is. This is not a question of free speech. This is not a question of which football team you like or which political party you like or which person in the street you like. This is a question of science versus superstition. I am not afraid to give that word in these circumstances. The science is clear that vaccination saves lives at any age, from an infant too young to be vaccinated to an older person such as myself suffering from autoimmune illness and needing herd immunity, as well as the protection from vaccination such as the flu vaccine. We do not want in our progressive council people pushing ideas that do not promote the health of our residents. We should stand for science, good health, and sensible policies, and that is why I'm supporting this policy. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Steer. Councillor Passes?
I think Councillor York should be commended for this motion, and I can understand her concern. And I wholeheartedly agree with 1, 2, 3. It's good that we have young mums on council that are on top of these things. At my age, you don't even know when the school holidays are on. Now, I don't have a problem with it. I'm pro-vaccination. I have a friend that is opposed. And since her 2 children are being born, I've done nothing but try to convince her the merits of vaccination. She's floating all around Sydney looking for places that she can take her children to play groups because they're not vaccinated. However, I have a problem when somebody comes up and wants to hire a council venue. I don't think our application they have to fill out or they're questioned on what are they hiring the venue for. So to vote for number 4, I go for the first 3, there'd have to be something put in place Excuse me. I'd have to see our policy. We know that this is serious. We know it's not just Labor, Green or Liberal wanting to hire the town hall for a meeting or something. But I also feel maybe pro-vaccination people would like to attend a meeting that the anti-vaxxers are putting on to see where they're coming from. I believe in dialogue. I don't believe in shutting the door. Where do we draw the line on who we hire our venues to? That's my only concern. The whole motion is fantastic, and as I said, Councillor York's to be commended for bringing it to our attention. But I don't know what way we can go around this. To me, it's discrimination. Even though people with a different view, it's serious, their different view. But there is no law that says people that do not vaccinate their children are going to be charged or locked up. We have ratepayers that are anti-vaxxers. So how can we say you can't attend a meeting to listen to what people, like-minded people like you have to say? I'm in a dilemma with this one.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Further discussion? Councillor Lockie?
Yeah, I'd like to speak in support of the motion. Outside of council, I work as a copywriter and I work fairly heavily in the not-for-profit sector. So I've written a number of campaigns based around vaccination programs that are run in countries where measles is still very prevalent. And they're some of the most affecting campaigns I've worked on when you hear of people who will walk for hours, if not days, to reach the nearest free vaccination clinic because they know what it is to watch children die of measles. And it's such a preventable disease because of the vaccination programs we have in place now. And so, you know, I'm fortunate my child is old enough now that she's had the full series of MMR vaccines, so I don't have to worry about her being exposed before she's vaccinated, but I can completely understand anybody with a newborn child or a child who's immunocompromised or unable to get the vaccines, why they would be very frightened to see this disease, which is preventable but also deadly, and also can leave even survivors with some very serious lifelong side effects, seeing it make a comeback in a very sad way. And one other thing I will add is I'm probably one of the few people of my age who has a smallpox vaccine scar because I was born over in Indonesia where they were still doing the vaccines at the time I was born, and that obviously is one of the diseases that very famously is eradicated through most, if not all, countries throughout the world because of strong vaccination programs. And you know, I have friends who are anti-vaxxers, and I commend Councillor Passes for engaging in communication with her friends who are, because I find I have to step away. But I think as a council we can't afford to step away. And I think it's important to note as well, we are not prohibiting these events from happening within the Inner West. We are just taking a stand that as a council, these are not events that we will host in our own buildings, much as the same way as Councillor York has noted. We have taken a similar stand in our childcare centres that we don't allow anti-vax stands at our events already, so it's an extension of our existing policy, and I think it's the only moral stand we can take on an issue like this.
Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor York, for bringing this forward before Council. But I'm not sure that items 2 and 3, which are essentially the action items of your motion, are capturing, I think, what you actually want to do. I think you're wishing to have a measles campaign specifically, is that right? Rather than saying we remind and promote the community the existing free immunisation service, well, we can do that, but essentially you would like to background that by saying we have an issue with measles, and this can impact on very young children who are not yet available to have the measles vaccination. I think that's very important in part 2. That's the essence, I think, of what you want to achieve. And writing to the New South Wales Department of Health seeking an update on best practices in promoting and incentivising immunisations. Again, I think that's if I've read your motion correctly, that's very specific to this measles outbreak at the moment. So we need to write to them to say, what are your policy decisions? How are you acting on this? How are you incentivising people to respond to the measles issue? Am I correct in saying we want that specific information and very targeted campaign given your motion? Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Smollers, you're correct that I'm seeking what the motion says. But I just really briefly want to reiterate my point that this is not a freedom of speech issue. This is not about shutting down a legitimate debate where there are two sides that are of equal prominence and equal standing. There are very few issues, I think, where that's the case, and this is one of them. I don't think we're setting any precedent by making a clear statement that it is not appropriate that ratepayers in our community foot the bill for these kinds of events. I didn't have time in my opening comments to share this, but I think it's also worth noting that this, in my very short experience of this, is often not anything like rational debate. In fact, it very quickly verges on completely irrational. I'd like to just share a couple of the comments that have been made to me on my Facebook page, and indeed in person here this evening, that I've been brainwashed or am on the role of Big Pharma, that vaccines cause sudden infant death syndrome, that measles is actually good for you. Here's a quote: "I fear that in future we'll look back and ask how we could poison our children the way we are, the same way we can't comprehend how Hitler was able to brainwash his people." This was definitely not the only reference to Hitler and Nazis in the discussion that was going on my Facebook page. And then my favourite was, so far, how about go and inject yourself with the poison and leave people who know what's really in them alone. I don't think it's controversial to suggest that we do not welcome these kinds of messages in our community-owned buildings. So I recommend the motion to all councillors this evening.
I'll put that. All those in favour? All those against? Has been carried unanimously after all that. Next item. Climate emergency, Councillor Cruz.
Thank you. Fellow councillors, I'm asking for your support for this motion before you to publicly acknowledge that we're in a state of climate emergency and reflect this emergency in the CEO's performance agreement, which is due to be signed shortly, and Council's key performance indicators and policies by May 2020. I would like to thank Mr. Pearce from the Extinction Rebellion for asking me to bring this motion to Council and for coming to speak tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Chase from Climate Change Balmain Roselle, and Ms. Raffle from Stop Adani for coming to also speak, and for their persistent advocacy and activism on the cause of climate change. My motion is based on one passed at Randwick Council last night, but I would also like to acknowledge the input from the CEO to include points 2 and 3 in the motion, and the feedback I've had on that from other councils is that they are envious of how strong our motion actually is. In actually canvassing support, I also have support from Haberfield resident and former Ashfield Mayor Vince Sicari. He sent a message of support commending Council on taking a stand before it is too late for the Barrier Reef, our food bowl, the Murray-Darling Basin, and the island nations of the Pacific. He points out that parts of our country are already experiencing unprecedented droughts and our very existence is at stake. By declaring an emergency, we will not be alone. We will be joining 17 other councils in Australia and 520 worldwide, as well as Scotland, Wales, and the UK and Ireland, who have also declared an emergency. In declaring an emergency, we commit to do more than business as usual and reform as usual. We will need temporary protection and adaptation measures while prevention and restorative measures are put in place and achieve their full effect. Taking the lead on climate change is not new to our community. In June 1994, Leichhardt Council adopted an energy efficiency DCP for all new houses and major renovations.
This was a world first and forerunner of BASICs. In 2005, I myself was on a steering committee for a successful project sponsored by Leichhardt Council and funded by the Howard government, which replaced incandescent light bulbs in local homes with more efficient, longer-lasting fluorescent light bulbs. Since then, Council and our community have installed solar panels and LED lighting. We have just about divested from fossil fuels. However, we're yet to tackle transport seriously or focus on the employment and business opportunities of a low-carbon economy. Inaction will have terrible environmental and economic consequences. We must declare a climate emergency now. Thank you.
Briefly, yeah. Look, thanks, Councillor De Cruz, and thanks very much to everyone who's come today to speak and to witness this. I think this is actually a very important step. We're seeing all over the world people are waking up to the fact that climate change is real, and 30 years ago that wasn't the case. But now, today, yes, we need to change our language and recognize the science is saying that it's not really enough to say that we're experiencing climate change. We're experiencing climate breakdown and a climate emergency. And I think that this is, although this is a declaratory motion that we're making today, it shadows work and prefigures work that we should commit to do on council. So we have already achieved divestment of our over $200 million of funds from fossil fuel aligned investments. And now we're seeing that the Chief Executive is proposing to include in his performance agreement references to the climate emergency. And I really think that that's the way we need to go. We need to drive this change through all of council, not just through our environment and sustainability team. They're doing fantastic work, but every team, every part of our council needs to recognize that we're in a climate emergency. I think that this is really important in our communication as well when we're talking to the community, because we need to know that we need everyone in the community to know that we're in an emergency. It's not, we can't dig up any more coal, we can't dig up any more fossil fuels. It's a shame really that we're going into a federal election where both parties are committed to coal. Neither party has committed to stopping Adani. And in fact, Labor has committed to investing $1.5 billion in fracking in the Northern Territory. How we can do this during a climate emergency, I don't understand. And I really think that the community is ahead of our politicians on this one. So I'd love to see all of our communication about climate change use this language. And I think that that will reflect shifts that we're seeing in the community.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to support the notion that we adopt a declaration of climate emergency. I'm familiar with the work of both the local residents who have contacted us in support of this motion and more generally of Extinction Rebellion. I understand the global campaign and the work that's been done by activists in many countries across the world. In having been contacted over the last week or so by several local residents, as I guess many councillors have been, a number of them pointed out to me that this motion was entirely symbolic and of no consequence, and so therefore should be adopted. No harm, no foul kind of thing. Look, there is clearly a highly symbolic element to this. I understand the importance of that and of the language that we're using in this instance. I've got to say, though, that I am also concerned with the substance. I'm pleased to hear that the CEO made some recommendations to that end. However, I would like to suggest some further changes or perhaps an alternative that goes to actually capturing some of the specifics of commitments that this council has made and that other councillors have referenced already in the discussion tonight. I think any discussion about KPIs, whether they are performance or budget related, needs to be specific. And so to that end, I've listed a number of the actions that this council has adopted over the last 18 months, including the divestment of our investment portfolio from fossil fuels, our recent adoption of carbon neutrality and renewable energy targets by 2025 of 100%, and some of the actions that Mr. Case referenced in his comments about the work that's been started to make the Inner West a leader in renewable energy, which again are listed there. There's a bit more, I think, if you scroll up, if the minute takers scroll up. So establishing an Office of Renewable Energy Innovation, expediting the retrofit of our council buildings with solar PV, council providing a brokerage service. I'm not going to list them all. People in the room, such as Mr. Case, have been helpful in us adopting, coming up with these policies, which have been moved, I think, in their entirety by either myself, the Mayor, or Councillor McKenna here. I agree that I'd like to see a lot of these moving a little bit more quickly than they are today. I agree that there is definitely a lot of merit, therefore, in consolidating them as KPIs, and I'd like to make sure that this council takes the opportunity to make these as specific as possible.
Thank you, Councillor. Might speak briefly in support. Yes, I will come to you. I'll speak briefly in support of Councillor York's amendment, which I think is sensible and complementary to the primary motion. It is symbolic to agree to a statement about a climate emergency. Symbolism is sometimes important, often important, but it does also have limits. And in the case of local government, it is important that we don't just make symbolic statements, but that we take practical measures. And Councillor York's outlined a series of resolutions that were adopted by the council immediately after the election, with the support of Climate Change Balmain Roselle, 350.org, the Total Environment Centre, a range of third-party organisations. And they were developed by Councillor York and myself and other Labor councillors and proposed here. And some of them have been implemented very successfully. At the time of the amalgamation, the combined three councils were 50% divested from fossil fuels. Through the advisory committee process, we forced the administrator into adopting a target of increasing that. It was 70% by the time the new elected council was reformed, and we're now at 99%. We're light years in front of any other council in New South Wales or Australia. We have signed a contract to source 30% of our daytime energy use from Mayoral Solar Farm. We've signed another contract to systematically retrofit our residential street lights with LED. Both of those things will have enormous impacts in terms of reducing our emissions. But there's a range of other things that have been outlined in Councillor York's amendment, which are in the system, but which haven't been implemented as yet. And to tell you the truth, getting a governmental organisation to actually be able to carry out these things and deliver outcomes is a lot harder than voting for statements of symbolism. It's a lot harder. It's what we spend all our time doing. So I agree that incorporating sound like Kevin Rudd there for a second, specific KPIs in relation to climate change and renewables into the CEO's performance contract is a good idea. One of the advantages of having recruited a CEO who's a former CEO of Infrastructure Australia, having come from running the South Australian Department of Planning, Infrastructure and Transport, is that he's ambitious about the sorts of criteria that we should include in his contract. And stating the nature of this emergency and including specific criteria will help us to break through some of the bureaucratic hurdles that we're encountering at the moment. So I support the York amendment. I've got Councillor Passis and Councillor Lockie.
First of all, I respect any group that believes in something and fights for it, and even with great opposition. However, I don't believe there's an emergency.
Shame!
where climate
No, I'm
change...
sorry, just one moment, Councillor Passos.
That's all right. I'm not ashamed. I don't believe it. I'll repeat it.
No, I'll call
I'm not
the
a bit
meeting-
ashamed.
Just one moment. I'll call the meeting to order. I'm not going to put up with interjections from the gallery. It's a civilised democratic forum in which people can express differing views, and elected representatives have the right to. So if you can't help yourself but interject, go and wait outside. Please proceed.
Thank you. There is an emergency. The emergency, I'll tell you, we have at the moment is winter's coming and the elderly in the area with paying such high rates and with the cost of living, they're too scared to put their heaters on. That's an emergency. When they've only got a few years left on this earth, they've worked hard all their lives and they have to ration their heating or go to bed early. Now, there's not a thing we can do about climate change, this council. We can do our little bit to look good and try and attract a few green votes or a few people that have been brainwashed to such an extent. Yes, we have to be responsible with everything we do in this life, not just the climate. It's the way we live our life, it's the way we eat, it's the way we work. We have to be responsible. But if anybody thinks that the Inner West Council is going to vote tonight for this motion and the emergency passes tomorrow morning, they're having themselves on. Now, I recall we had signs all over the area, nuclear-free zone. Then I recall we had no war zone. And I was pretty sure Ashfield put that up, and I was pretty sure if we were going to be attacked, the enemy would have said, uh-oh, Ashfield's got a sign, let's go and bomb Marrickville. We better not bomb Ashfield, they've got a no war zone here.
We've never been bombed. No nuclear attack.
Well, either was Marrickville. So the sign means nothing, and this means nothing. As the Mayor said, moves are afoot. The council is doing much that it can with the finances that we have. Zero food waste cannot happen. Sounds good, cannot happen. And if we implement this new policy, all it's going to do is cost these poor pensioners and low-income families more money, because it won't happen. The last 20 years, we've had about 20 different recycling and garbage policies. People will generate rubbish and we have to and they're paying for us to find a way to get rid of it. That's up to the experts. It's not up to a council, and this council, we can't even sweep our streets. We can't even fix our footpaths. We have drainage problems here. The infrastructure is crumbling. And we're going to put this emergency motion up tonight about climate change. This is absolutely political. It's hypocritical. I can't wait for the election to be over, and then you'll have nothing else to bring up.
Okay, councillors, further discussion? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion or to further amend it?
I just
Councillor
spoke
Lockie?
against it.
Yeah, my suggestion is just in relation to the amendments Councillor York has proposed. I do support them. I think they're good additions, but I would suggest that they are additions to the motion rather than replacements for points 2 and 3, because obviously they're all excellent initiatives. We've voted for them before. They absolutely should happen, but they're not in and of themselves necessarily the only things we can do at council level to address the climate emergency. And as the Mayor has pointed out, we are fortunate enough to have a CEO with an extensive background in this area. I wouldn't want to see us limit ourselves. He's certainly indicated that he's open to looking at different ways of doing this. So I would suggest that we amend point 2 to include those, the immediate adoption of those points, but also keep the wording around emergency and not shut ourselves off from other ways of looking at this.
Councillor York.
I thank you for your eagle eyes, Councillor Lockie. I was anticipating there may be a question along those lines. It's certainly not intended to be limiting. I'm happy, in fact, to add an additional point at the end that says, and any other relevant initiatives as adopted by council.
Okay, I'm going to go just a moment, Councillor Stamoulis. Councillor De Cruz, do you wish to incorporate the amendments into the primary motion?
This one? Yeah. I'd like, Councillor York, I'd like to actually adopt these, but actually incorporate them the way Councillor Lockie has suggested into point 2, so that it reads, includes, the KPIs include these issues, these points.
I suggest you guys just have a chat. Councillor
That's fine.
Stamoulis.
Okay. Can you do that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, as Councillor Porteous and yourself will recall, on Leichhardt Council we had a strong functioning environment committee, and we also had a climate change subcommittee, which was an excellent committee. When we moved to the new formats of the local democracy groups in the Inner West Council, we retained the Environment Advisory Committee, and there was some discussion about a climate change committee or climate committee, but we didn't proceed with that. Now here we have an urgent motion before us, and one would think that maybe we need that dual structure again, that we retain the Environment Advisory Committee, which is currently existing, of course, and that we do review or think about creating a climate change working group as a subcommittee of that group. So I'm going to ask, as an amendment, that Council consider forming a climate emergency working group. Thank you.
I'm going to rule that out of order. It's not related. It's not an amendment. It would be a foreshadowed motion if they were allowed. It would certainly be an amendment to the motion from you. That is the next item on the agenda, which is in relation to our local democracy groups. So I suggest you move it as an amendment at that time. Okay, councillors, there's no further discussion. Councillor De Cruz. Yes.
I think the motion, climate emergency, is changing the terminology. We started off with global warming, we went to climate change. This is a rebadge, it's like a reboot. And actions have to follow behind the words. And as clearly as I stated earlier, council has a large role to play, as every individual has a role to play. And if it's an emergency, I guarantee you, when this meeting ends, you go upstairs, go to the car park, you'll see all the councillors driving home in their cars. That's the emergency to get home. So until people actually take it seriously, you start to look a bit farcical if you don't put the actions behind what you're saying. And one of the clear things I brought up was about the accommodation of this council and how it actually treats its staff and how it treats the environment, operating out of 3 buildings that are antiquated and actually do not meet energy standards that we place on other people that are living and building in buildings. We have to look at how we do things if we're fed income. I'll support this motion, but I want to see action from councillors. And when it comes time to do something, we need to do it, not try and be petty and talk it down. We have to move forward, not backwards. The largest city is New York. It's a very green city because people don't use motor vehicles. Their lives are lived almost 4 blocks. How can they be more environmentally savvy than us here with all the space and all the resources at our feet? I mean, I support solar energy. I have solar panels. I challenge how many other councillors here have solar panels? How many have adopted them on their homes? If you live in a unit, have you fought your body corporate to actually say, listen, we want solar panels for the house lights? You know, those are the sorts of actions that will actually turn things and actually be meaningful. But it means people have to go out of their comfort zone and they have to actually do something if they believe it. It's not just hear pretty words and hoo-ha and we'll write a few things down on a piece of paper. It's the actions that count. And that's what you need to keep account of. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
I think everything's been said.
Excellent. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against?
fellow councillors. The Inner West has moved to a very different approach for our committees. We've removed the statutory committees that each council previously had. We've stopped these committees from being open committees now, so that's quite a significant difference. Therefore, it's vital that the new local democracy group structures fill in a very important role or gap for our community and for council itself. So we need to know what we want from these groups and what they're doing. The current experience with LDG suggests that we may want to address problems before they are entrenched. And this is what this motion's hoping to do. And I hope there's some amendments to this motion because that's what I want to achieve, is the thoughts of my fellow councillors in making sure that these groups do respond to the needs of our council and our community. In particular, some of the problems that I'm seeing is that there's some inconsistency across the LDGs. The agendas don't seem to be full agendas. There's no papers attached to those for our councillors and others in the community to see what these groups are doing. Pardon me. The minutes are inconsistent as well. Some have minutes, some don't. And of course, the other thing I think some councillors have talked to me about is there's no pathway to council yet from these groups. It's quite early, but we need to make sure there is a pathway for that information to get to council. So you'll see the notice of motion that it's probably in draft form, and I'm very happy for councillors to make some changes to that, but it's addressing those concerns that we've written down on paper our expectations, but I'm not seeing them manifest themselves in practice. So I think that's the key issue for me. And additionally, I mentioned there that even some of the members of the group on the LDG, some of the LDGs are saying the frequency is too small to be actually engaged with council. Now that might not be entirely true across all the LDGs, but some of those where the pace of planning is moving fast, the pace of the environment or climate is moving very fast, 4 meetings may not be practical, and council should review these at an earlier stage and make these groups functional. And again, the amendment from the previous motion that I put in, I'd like to put it up, that small amendment that we consider creating a climate emergency working group. Thank you, councillors.
I'd like to move an amendment to the... I'd like to amend the motion.
Yeah, I'll check if there's a second to the motion first. Seconded by Councillor Cruz. You wish to speak to it? Councillor Fortius?
Yes, look, I did briefly speak to Councillor Stamoulis about amending his motion, which I believe he's amenable to. The fact is that I've also been making some inquiries as to how our local democracy groups are working. There is an interim review coming up at the end of this year of the groups, and I think that the information and reporting requirements and the frequency of meetings could be considered as part of that review. So what I would propose is that Councillor Stamoulis amend his motion to remove number 3 and to consolidate 1 and 2 such that it reads, review information and reporting requirements and the frequency of meetings in relation to the local democracy groups as part of the interim review of the local democracy groups in late 2019. And I've just sent that wording through to the minute taker. I think this captures what Councillor Stamoulis is seeking to achieve, but it works within the framework that's already been identified by the council staff, and it just gives a bit more direction about some of the things that we'd like addressed at the time. There have been some issues, I think, around not all of the groups perhaps reporting in a timely manner to the website in terms of minutes and agendas. Some had terms of reference up, some didn't, and some had list of members, some didn't. So I do think it's obviously going through a period where these groups are being established, and we need to enable them to be established, but we also want to make sure that we keep the community that's put up their hand to be members of these groups, that they stay engaged with these groups. And certainly I think that there are still some tweaking that needs to happen. Obviously I think all the councillors are attending different groups and getting an understanding about how they're functioning, and we probably need to just all of us just give some feedback, I think, to the General Manager and the relevant Deputy General Manager in terms of where we just need a little bit of bit more of an understanding about how those groups are working to make sure that they're working really efficiently. Something that was raised, for example, in the most recent Access Committee that I attended was that there's actually quite a big quorum that was required. There's a quorum of 8 that's required at that particular meeting, and it was discussed that, for example, at the Leichhardt Access Committee, they actually had a reduced quorum because of the difficulty of the members, because they are people with disability, being able to attend the meetings, and that it might be something that would be reasonable to address with that particular committee to have a reduced quorum to make sure that they could still function as a committee, and that it wouldn't be impeded by some of the members. You know, for example, on this particular occasion, there was some transport issues that stopped some of the members being able to get there because they use wheelchairs, and it was too difficult for them to actually get to the meeting. You know, another issue was could we use technology, for example, when members, and particularly an access committee, I think there's areas where we can improve, and so I hope that we continue along that trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, I'm going to rule that your amendment is in fact a foreshadowed motion, although Councillor Stamlis could still agree to that wording, in which case it could be moved.
Look, I'm happy to replace 1, 2 and 3 with that.
Okay. Well, I think that makes it fairly uncontroversial. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against it?
Yes, wait a minute, let me read through this.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about the Climate Emergency Subcommittee.
No, could you push it back?
Yeah, so, just to clarify for you, Councillor Passos, and for everybody else, Councillor Stamlis's motion has now been wholly replaced by a 2-point motion that was proposed by Councillor Porteous.
What is it with Councillor Stamlis and Porteous? Each one's trying to pitch each one's motion.
I'll call the meeting to order.
What's happening?
Call the meeting to order. Call the meeting to order.
It's one upmanship.
Okay.
You're still coming third. I know you didn't get the double quote you thought you'd get. Hang on.
Okay.
No, I won't be going that. Consider creating a climate emergency subcommittee. What for?
Okay, further discussion, councillors. There's no further...
I'm happy to move point 2. I'll move that as a separate amendment so that it can be voted on separately.
No problem. Okay, so Councillor Porteous is moving point 2 as a separate amendment, which will be voted on separately. I'll go to Councillor Stamlis for his right of reply before we vote on that amendment.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Do you accept that amendment?
Yeah, we'll vote separately.
Oh, you're not too easy, mate. You're too much of a gentleman.
We're voting on separately. I'll put the Porteous-Stamlis amendment to consider creating a climate emergency subcommittee. All those in favour, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7. That has been defeated. I now put the primary motion, the Stamlis de Cruz motion. All those in favour, raise your hands. All those against? That has been carried with Councillor Macri and Councillor Passos against. Councillor Macri for, Councillor Passos against. Next item. Notice of motion, Councillor Executive Briefing.
Our community would be quite surprised if they knew that the Inner West Council had no formal and regular briefing between councillors and council executive. I think they'd be very surprised at that does not occur, especially during the time of the most historic transformation that will ever occur in the Inner West. That's the merger. So if any time that we need this, let alone all the time, it's certainly not occurring now. I believe that the new Inner West Council needs to set up a productive and effective exchange and communication between the governing body and Council's executive. This should be a standard risk measure. Councillors have mentioned that our current briefings have not answered councillors' needs for information, and it's very much appreciated that the CEO has acknowledged this and is looking at better alternatives. Well, I'm proposing one right now by way of this notice of motion. My notice of motion, I believe, puts a good option on the table for councillors, and in a way that demonstrates there's an effective relationship between the governing body and between councillors executive. So I'm hoping here that the priority briefing for councillors would be that one between council executives and the councillors. I'm proposing here that it might be 30 minutes if the session commences, with a 30-minute briefing by the CEO, and then each of the deputy CEOs 20 minutes each. For instance, we had the budget discussion this evening, where we're all feeling a little bit unaware of some of the decisions made, some of the changes. We wouldn't be unaware because our CEO, Deputy CEO of Finance, and our CEO would be briefing us once a month on the budget. There would be no surprises. We'd be in tune with what's going on. We'd certainly be in tune with a lot of the key decisions being made currently at the staff level about changes to service levels, about harmonisation of a lot of our policies. We're getting a bit of this second hand sometimes. That will avoid that. I believe this should be the essential briefing for councillors, and I hope that councillors will support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there a seconder for the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Passos. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, I don't. I'll put it to the vote, please. Let's go.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Kiat.
Through the chair to the chief executive, can you let us know what your sense is of the briefings so far during your tenure and what your plans are for the future?
I'll put that to the CEO.
What a question to put.
Thanks, Councillor. Certainly, in the short time I've been here, we've gone through and had a look at the briefing process and the structure of those arrangements. I'm hopeful to have shortly, consistent with what Councillor Stamoulis has proposed, a much more rigorous briefing structure, so it's clear. So there's a couple of things, perhaps in terms of structure. We've provided a draft annual meeting schedule and meeting topics to all councillors to consider. I'm yet to have any feedback on that, but that would be useful, so that we can then align the council meetings with the briefings, budget issues, so it all comes together and comes together as part of my performance agreement, so that we can consistently map out for councillors a year ahead of the end point is the matters that might be considered at council, but the steps through will be briefing material, an opportunity for councillors to engage in that more deeply and at the beginning of the process, so that we can better inform and have a better relationship between the executive and councillors. Some of the briefings I saw were not of the quality that I would expect. For councillors to be receiving a briefing which was effectively reading out an article in the Sydney Morning Herald is not what I think is best practice on insects. And I also think we should have, I think as Councillor Porteous has raised before, the need to have councillors engaged at the beginning of the key strategic items. So separating these issues out from big strategic issues, some of which have been discussed tonight, through to some of the matters that are noted, so that councillors are on top of where these things are going. I don't think that's happened to date, and I'm keen that that's where we move to.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Kiat, did you wish to speak to the matter?
Yeah, I want to indicate that I won't be voting for this. I think it is important that we develop a good system for briefing and involving councillors in decision making outside of council meetings. I don't think, and I agree with what Councillor Stamoulis has said and some of the frustrations he's expressed, particularly in relation to the budget. I think it was just unfortunate with the timing of certain events at council that those briefings didn't occur. But I feel confident that our new chief executive will develop a system that we can test out and see if it works, and I'm convinced that you're committed to it, so I don't see the need to restrict you with this.
Okay, thank you for that. There's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those 8? Oh, the scander gets down off the fence, eh? 8. All those against? Usually it's Councillor Stamoulis who waits to see where the hands are going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That has been carried. Next item. Notice of motion. National Disability Strategy submission.
Yes, look, Look, I'm probably okay, but I'm sorry, I just thought maybe I should declare a non-pecuniary, non-significant interest, only because I work in the disability sector. It does not impact in any way on my work, but I'll just make a declaration, if that's okay, if we could just acknowledge that I've made a non-pecuniary, non-significant declaration with
Councillor
regards to
Porteous
this.
is declare. I think it's
pretty, yeah. I did make the same declaration in the meeting itself, and I was told everybody works in the sector, so shut up, Rochelle. So, but I'll just make it again, just to be completely.
Councillor Porteous is making a declaration of a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest. Is there a mover to accept that? Moved by Councillor Lockie, seconded by Councillor Kiat. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Please proceed.
Okay, thanks. Look, there's the National Disability Strategy, which was one of the items that was on the agenda of the most recent Access Committee. It is a really important strategy that has only come up every 10 years. They're actually reviewing it now, and they are in the process of developing a new strategy. I think it's really important that Council makes a submission. The intention was for Council to make a submission. The request on the night from the members was to make a submission, but unfortunately, because there wasn't a quorum, that wasn't able to be moved by the committee. So Councillor Hesse and myself, who were present at the meeting, said that as councillors we would bring this to the council meeting so that there was a clear direction that the committee would like a submission to be made. So I think it's pretty non-controversial, just reflecting what was the wishes of the committee, but I think it is good practice for us to be making submissions for these important issues as well. I'll probably leave it there.
Okay, thank you for that.
I probably just need another second of those.
Councillor Steele will second it. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next item, notice of motion, Newstart Raise the Rate campaign. Councillor Kiat.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to thank Thomas Students and Rosanna Barbero, who thank you for still being here, and for being involved in this campaign. And the stories you told were incredibly compelling. We all know people who live in poverty who are on Newstart or youth allowance or the disability support pension or the age pension. But you work with those people on a day-to-day basis, and you experience and work with them through their hardship, and you bring a unique perspective to this issue, and particularly the work of the Unemployed Workers Union, which I've become more familiar with in the last year. A really, really vital campaign and group, and I think that it's making waves with ACOS and on board, and also with political parties increasingly getting on board. As I said, we live in a wealthy society, but 3 million Australians live in poverty. As councillors, we've probably all been approached by people in our community who are experiencing poverty and either are accessing our services or are unable to access our services because of that. And it has the rate of Newstart and the rate of youth allowance as well is actually disgraceful. It's a human rights issue. In a country where we're as wealthy as we are, but we can't provide enough jobs for everyone to earn a wage, it's just disgraceful that we're forcing people to live in poverty. And this is essential because for every job advertised, there are dozens of people applying. It's not about people too lazy to work. It's just about providing a decent standard of living for everyone. And this issue will only get worse with automation of work. We're going to have more and more people who can't find work and will rely on security, social security. During this term of the federal government, there have been a number of unsuccessful motions to raise Newstart, moved by Greens MPs. And we're about, hopefully, to have a change of government, but the ALP has not yet committed to an increase. They have committed to a review, and I understand that Councillor Byrne was involved in that through the ALP conference. I think we need to put as much pressure as we can on an incoming ALP government. There are we will be the 30th local government to support this campaign, and we need as many community groups, as many local governments, as many state governments as possible campaigning, supporting this campaign so that if we do have a change of government, we can change this injustice which has been going on for over 2 decades.
Thank you for that. Seconder for the motion, seconded by Councillor Lockie. Do you wish to speak to it? No problem. Councillor Steele, do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. The current federal government spends 6 times on tax cuts to the top 4% of people as it does on the whole of the Newstart program. That is that the poorest people in our country are costing the government and the taxpayers almost nothing compared to the obscene rate of tax cuts offered by the present federal government. What this means is that increasing the rate of Newstart is not going to send the country broke. It's not going to have any effect on the bottom line at all, but it will change the lives of the people who depend upon it and who have no other choice but to live on it. We now see that the fastest growing rate of homeless are women over the age of 55, and that is because due to being carers during their lives and having lost money through divorce and other life catastrophes, they have not been able to develop the savings to cushion themselves. They must now rely on Newstart, and they cannot afford the lifestyle they once had as working women and now have to live in their cars and on the streets. This is the experience of life in Australia now. There are people who have lived on Newstart over generations, and that is because it has not been enough to break the cycle of poverty, and it creates an effect. There should be no shame if you need to be on Newstart, if you're in between jobs, or you're starting out in life, or you just need a helping hand. I myself was briefly received it back in the day after I left university, and my children have too, and before they found jobs. And we are the lucky ones who have been able to use it as a short stop measure when we needed it and not have to depend on it for the rest of our lives. But we need help, we need to give help and support to people, and once again, I just remind you that the top 4% are enjoying the 6 times the tax cuts that Newstart costs the country, and therefore we can afford to raise the rate.
Thank you for that. I might speak very briefly to the motion. I thank Councillor Kiat for proposing it. And it is true to say that it's a policy that I have advocated for through the Australian Labor Party, and I agree that it's incumbent upon an incoming Labor government, if one is elected on the weekend, to take action to raise the rate of income for the lowest paid Australians. In 1974, Gough Whitlam said, "For too long Australia has demeaned herself and millions of her fellow citizens by the idea that those unable to work deserve charity but lost their right to self-respect." And it is true that that same undignified status is still the lived experience of unemployed Australians today, and that the rate has been frozen for a quarter of a century. I agree with all of those principles. I'll make the same point in the discussion tonight that I've made to ACOS previously about the matter. This debate will not be won through resolutions of local councils. It's a bit like the climate emergency in that regard. It's an important piece of symbolism, one that I support. What I don't support is us kidding ourselves that this is a way to actually win the debate. And I also differ from Councillor Kiat. I concur with his statement that pressure should be exerted on an incoming Labor government, but I extend that to say that broad support has to be built across civil society, and it has to be made difficult for a Conservative opposition to oppose a raise to the rate of Newstart. The last two are much more difficult than the first. And so those of us who are advocating for this, I can intend to continue fighting for it myself, but let's do it with our eyes open. A motion at the Inner West Council is not how this will be achieved. In fact, persuading people in the Inner West of Sydney, a seat that has never elected anything other than a Labor member, is not how this debate will be won. It will be won when it's too difficult for people like Peter Dutton and Tony Abbott and Josh Frydenberg and Scott Morrison to oppose it because there's a general sentiment in the Australian community that is strongly held, that unemployed people deserve to be paid more, and that it's undignified and not decent that they are paid the lowly rate that they are at the moment. So let's have some more action beyond this. Those of us who are committed to it tonight, let's get outside of our comfort zone and make sure that we get out and talk to people right across Australia over the coming months to make sure that this is done by an incoming government. Councillor Iskander.
I would like to thank all the speakers, and I would like to thank the councillor who put it for us. It gives me the opportunity to raise very important issue. I lived it for more than 40 years in Australia. I used to work with young people. I am still working with young people. I am still helping young people to go and find a job, which it's not there. They need the money, otherwise they will go forced to find the money somewhere. Let's talk numbers here. If you have $200, $300, how can you live? So you will go to do negative actions to get the rest of the money from somewhere. Just remember, I was heavily involved in youth problem solving when the problem in the inner city, and especially in Marrickville, was at its highest. That was because no money for young people for themselves. Because they don't have money. Well, put yourself in that situation and see what can you do. Young people now, they are under pressure more than before. Young people now, they really need the support of a very good hearted people of Australia, and we are. I do believe as a council, maybe we are unable to do what we have to do, but at least let's stand for these people, let's work with the people who are supporting them, and to be convinced, go and visit the food bank at Addison Road, and you know what I'm talking about. So please support this, and thank you very much for all the speakers before me. Thank you.
Important. And we have the capacity to advocate and to advocate really well and really effectively for our community if we have the will to do it. So I contest what Councillor Burns said. We can and we should support this motion, and we can and we should and we must advocate strongly to get Newstart, raise the rate, and to get a good rate of at least 75 immediately. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kiat.
Thanks to Councillor Steer, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Skandar, and Councillor Porteous, and thanks again to the campaigners who have come today, and of course to ACOS and the campaigner, I think Paz, who contacted me about this in the first place. I'd only conclude by saying I don't think it's meaningless what ACOS or UWU or Addison Road have done today in bringing this to us. I think, as far as I know, there's only one federal seat in the country where they have a member from a party who has committed to the minimal demand from ACOS, which is an immediate $75 increase, and that's the seat of Melbourne. That's held by Adam Bant. So I think every local government area who is committed to this campaign should be signalling to the members who represent them in the federal parliament that this is important. And I hope that we'll see that through the ALP, and I hope we can blame Peter Dutton and Tony Abbott and Josh Frydenberg as much as we like, but if there's a Labor government and there's not an increased Newstart, well then the Labor government's a problem. So
Glad this has been blatantly partisanised. That's a very effective.
Point of order.
You raised the issue. I think, anyway, I think it is important they raise it tonight. And look, I want to thank Addison Road for the work they're doing in our community, and I'd love to come and see the work that you do at the food bank as well.
Thank you for that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. I declare the meeting closed.